this webinar is Executive Derailment. My name is Wali, and this webinar is being organized by Madinah, which is Madinah Institute of Leadership. We are having an event in the Dammam, hopefully next month, inshallah, and this is a taster for that. I'm skipping my introduction. I think you can Google me, or you can see our website. Let's talk about this event. As I said, it's a taster webinar for a seminar which is on executive derailment next month, hopefully on this date. And what we are going to cover, we are looking at what executive derailment is, how it can be spotted early on in ourselves, and how we can work on preventing and or managing it. In addition to this, in the Dammam seminar, we will also, through an online assessment and open feedback, we would also like to look at what are early warning signals and how to interpret them. We will also like to design preventive measures for specific derailers to those delegates who attend those seminars. Because some of these derailers, as we will find out later in the webinar, that they are context specific. So maybe in Asian or in Arabian part, there are different sorts of derailments as opposed to those colleagues who are working in, say, USA or in Europe. And we'd also like to know how to manage our own and our team members' derailment. But the first question is, what is derailment, or what's a derailer? You can imagine a train which is going in a very fast speed, a bullet train or a fast speed train, and then it derails. What happens? There's a chaos, lots of lives are lost, damage to everything, to infrastructure, to organization. So if we take train as an analogy, and then we look at executive derailment, so train's driver is actually a leader, organizational leader, or a unit leader, or SBU leader. So he gets hurt or she gets hurt. Also the passengers, which means the other stakeholders, the followers, the team members, they get hurt. And the organization as a train itself, and it also gets hurt. And the damage to property other than the train, which means your environment, your context, so everybody gets affected. So that's a derailer. Now, what is exactly a derailer? So it's either a deficit, generally we call it weakness, or an overdose of strength. So it's different. A derailer is different from weakness. It's not merely, for example, any executive might have several weaknesses, but there are certain weaknesses that we choose to ignore, and we think we don't need to do anything about them because I'm still getting what I want. So my results or my relationships or my, I'm not, wouldn't fall in this category of a derailer. But those weaknesses which can impact your results or impact your relationships are would be considered in the derailer part. And there have been lots of studies, and we will discuss in a minute. Number two, an overdose of strength. So the list of derailers that we will see in a minute, we will see that those are probably not as bad as they seem. So on surface or with the naked eye, they might be all right. For example, confidence. So we'll say, what's harm in a confidence? So a small dose of confidence or an appropriate dose of confidence is okay. But if there's an overdose which turns self-confidence into an arrogance, for example, that will become a derailer. Yeah. But most of the literature that has been provided on derailment deals with the latter, which means a strength overplayed. Particularly a strength which has given you earlier successes. So which also means as we grow in organizations, there are more likely that we will face a derailer, or a derailer will actually come into our behavior probably unannounced, and we wouldn't even know until it's quite too late. Okay. So who has studied derailment? There are plenty of studies, and we will skip. I'll show you a bit. We wouldn't talk about these in in our workshops because that's more hands-on. But I can show you a few here. For example, McCall and Lombardo, 1983. So they looked at 6 possibilities, so 6 derailers. What I have also done, I have highlighted a common denominator which has gone in probably in all studies. So you can see at number 3, aloofness and arrogance. Or also now you can see number 4, insensitivity. And you will see these are recurring derailers which probably come in all studies. Center for Creative Leadership, which looks at leadership behaviors. So they haven't studied derailers as such, but they have looked at traits of effective leaders. So on the left side, you can see that there are 11 traits of effective leaders, and they have also identified those potential derailers which can counter these, which can undermine the success. An example, trustworthiness is a good trait of effective leaders, and that was also, I think, probably one of the top four trait of an effective leader that came from Tom Rath's recent book, Strengths-Based Leadership. And Tom is at the Gallup Engagement Index, the strength finder. Okay, so trustworthiness is a trait, but derailer would be being aloof. So you don't trust anyone, or you generally mistrust or distrust people. Okay, similarly, available to others, number 1, and insensitivity to other people's needs or their concerns or their feelings will become a potential derailer. So that's CCL, Center for Creative Leadership, 2001. Another one, Finkelstein, 2000, and he looked at when it happens. So when we create new ventures, or when we deal with innovation and change, when we have merger and acquisitions, and when there are new competitive pressures. So these are the times when there's likelihood that a derailer will creep in. Another study, Buller, and it's mostly gap-based. So it's really deficit-based, which means you are unable to, your inability or your failure to. So you can see failure to walk the talk or failure to delegate. Failure to delegate, what it will bring? It will bring your work-life balance issue, which also means both work relationships as well as family or social relationships will be affected. So you can also see number 3, failure to keep learning, which means what you have learned so far, you want to go ahead with this. You don't see that the market is changing, technology is changing, or there are new competitions. So probably you turn a blind eye towards that, or you develop a blind spot, and you dismiss everything. And I have seen so many leaders. Although I didn't introduce myself, but I have been working with senior level, C-level executives for many years now. I'm also an executive coach to many CEOs in Pakistan and elsewhere in the Middle East. I run a workshop called Leadership for CEOs. Probably I'm the only in-country resource who delivers this workshop. So I've been doing that for several years. And I've seen very successful chief executives, American education, which means they go through this critical analysis, orientation or socialization process. But despite that, they look at their strengths and they do have a blind spot, and they're not willing to actually accept that. Okay. So that was Buller, 2004. We also have Hunt, Bloom, and Hughes, 2004 again, and they looked at essentially how you run a business. So controlling leadership style, which ones you really want to micromanage. Although I could also say at this stage, because Steve Jobs, we now know after his biographies have come in after his death, that he was micromanager and he was very, very controlling. And he got away with that. And he successfully ran that company, which came up with projects and products after products, and which were loved by consumers, used, and they had great products. And even just we know that iPhone 5, and they received 2 million pre-orders within 24 hours. So that's very, very unusual. And Steve Jobs is but maybe we can have a look at that, where in spite of an apparent derailer, you might still be successful. Okay. So similarly, hesitancies to take necessary business risks, personal arrogance. So there's also recurring theme that comes, and reluctance to tackle difficult people issues, which means avoidance. So you say, okay, I'll deal with it later, or maybe they deal with themselves, but then they become a real disruptive issues. So next is Skillberg, 2006, concerns based. So my security concerns, my attachment concerns. So essentially, Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Yeah. So that comes into play. So power and control concerns, competition, rivalry, and achievement concerns. Yeah. So all of these. Yeah. Okay. IBM also did a study for their own executives, and they came up with these 10 lacks. Yeah, so to say. So lacks of self-control. Also, you can see as there. Okay. And probably one of last two is Adrian Funham, 2010. And that came in the book called The Elephant in the Boardroom, which is 2010 book, The Causes of Leadership Derailment. And he says, yeah, these are some of those derailers. So he has identified these 6 oddballs. Yes. So schizoid, borderline, avoidant, dependent. Yeah. And you also see aggressive or sadistic as number 6. Talent Q, which is also I think a coaching partner of mine, Madinah, and they have highlighted these 8 leadership derailment factors, and which include hypersensitivity, eccentricity, yeah, overconfidence. So there's also arrogance over there. If you can see number 3 from bottom, that's overconfidence. Okay. And Tim Milban's recent book called Derailed. So he actually looks at staged derailment as a staged process. So and also so that's like more individual, because Irwin has taken these 6 recent CEOs who failed their companies, or who came out as a derailment case studies. But there's also another book, 2009 book, How the Mighty Fall, by my favorite Jim Collins, who looks at how the organizations fail, and that's also stage-based failure. Okay, so if you can see, stage 1 is failure of self and others, and other awareness, and then pride. Number 2, stage 3, early warning signals, and stage 4, rationalizing, which means you rationalize your behavior. You say, oh, I don't bother about this derailment because I'm still getting my results. And finally, stage 5, derailment. Okay, now early warning signals. I also want to highlight this point, because my first training was in journalism, because I did my master's in with a communication degree, and then I went into print journalism in Pakistan newspapers. I also worked with BBC in London. And this is something in journalism. Nothing happens accidentally, or there's no surprise as such, because things actually give you early warnings, signals, but we avoid them. We ignore, we turn a blind eye towards them. So that's about early warning signals. And although organizations like United Nations, for example, so they will set up huge departments, lessons learned unit, or early warning signal units, although I doubt whether they are learning from them or not. But there are early warning signals that we can pick. But I'm sure probably in 5 to 10 years' time, the way Google is setting up its search and trying to predict future. So there might be an algorithmic search capability that can actually tell you before a flashpoint becomes a flashpoint, or before a public leader, somebody who is already in public eye, and they show early warning signals of derailment. So maybe there is, you can see. And those online assessments that I'll highlight in a moment, they will also identify your early warning signals. Okay. So these were a few studies that I wanted to mention. So which means if you want to know more about them, just Google them, find out more about them, read your, go to your library, look at those books.